So yesterday I was doing some filming as I basically hooked up our DC fridge for this new house that we're going to be living in soon, hopefully. And I was filming a bunch of stuff and thought I needed to do a little intro for that video because we're talking about kind of planning and designing your power system if you're living off-grid. Now there's a huge spectrum. You can have like zero electricity to like fully wired everything and full power everything. So like the zero option, that would be like if you like do all of your cooking on your wood cook stove and you have candles and lanterns for light and you maybe get your water from a stream or a hand pump well. So there's definitely ways of doing it with zero electricity. And then you can go to the other end of the spectrum, which would be like you have a power system so big that you never need to run a generator. You've got so many solar panels that even in winter in Alaska, you can still power everything you could possibly want to power. Now, in between is most of us. We're definitely much closer to the low power end of things. And that means we have to get a little bit creative, and so most of what we're talking about when we're planning the system is how we can get by using as little as possible, but still have like plenty of light, still have plenty of fridge space, still have things like internet when we want it, so that it's trying to find that like balance between like how much you're investing and what is a good quality of life. And so for us, we have found ours with a relatively small system. So you just saw me plug in a DC 12-volt fridge. These are often called solar fridges. I like to use a DC fridge for a number of reasons. This one we're going to keep in this little auxiliary room, which we're going to call an entryway. It's connected to this kind of greenhouse room at the moment, but at some point I'm going to build a little wall between them so that this entryway doesn't get too warm, because if it gets warm, that fridge is going to switch on all the time, like during summertime. I don't want that to happen. I like the fridge to be in a partially insulated room, little cooler than the rest of the house so it doesn't switch on very often, but also a room that's going to stay cool in summertime. So you want it to be a room that is not freezing in winter, not too warm in summer, so that it cycles on and off as little as possible. So when I made that solar installation video, I talked about how this is kind of the power hub for the house. All the power comes in through this little hole in the wall here. These beefy cords, beefy cables, connect to the back of the inverter, but they also go up to this little terminal block that then goes throughout the house to provide DC electric to other terminal blocks. In a way, I kind of think of them as outlets, but they're basically just there to provide light. Because that's the thing that you need most when you're kind of doing an off-grid house, is lights, especially wintertime in Alaska. So it's nice that we can have lights turned on without having to have our inverter turned on. And here's why. I was looking up the stats on our inverter, which seems to be a pretty good one. It's 2,500 watts. I don't know if you can see that from there. But just being on without any load on it, it's pulling 1.3 amps. So if we were to have designed our house so that we use AC power, and we wanted to use that power anytime that we needed it, we would need to have this thing running 24/7. Now 1.3 amps running 24/7 is really going to be considerable when we are in wintertime and not getting a whole lot of sun. And that was kind of the mistake we made our first winter, and basically had all AC everything, including AC fridge, AC lights. And so just to have your lights and fridge running, which are the main things that people have, it really just ate up our electricity. So if I have a DC fridge that only switches on when it needs to, I don't have to have this on to make sure that our food is being kept safe. If we need to run like 3 of these little light bars, then we can have light throughout the house. So we might have one upstairs, one in the kitchen, one in the living room, whatever. We can have all that going on without having to have our inverter on. And here's another cool thing that I discovered. It has these little USB ports on the side. Now it's not switched on right now. If I want to switch it on, this comes up, it tells me what my voltage is, etc. I'm going to switch it off. And when I plug in my phone to charge, my phone, hey, guess what? You're charging now. So that's another benefit that's really cool. Our current setup at our old house doesn't have that. But I really like that because sometimes during winter, all we really need is a little bit of light and to charge our phones or tablets or whatever it is you're going to be charging with USB. So we get power coming through that USB. It doesn't have to have the inverter switched on. So that's kind of cool, and I'm looking forward to that saving us a little bit of energy during winter times.
Other areas of the park will require.
So you see here we have a
by the response
DC 12-volt radio.
Flooding, and oh yes, there will be potholes.
And it's connected to a couple of alligator clips right here.
And other events, make sure to check out our Facebook page.
So that if I want to have radio in some other room of the house, if I'm working and want some background music, I just unclip it and clip it to any other terminal block that might be located somewhere else in the house. So what that means is we also kind of have to have these wires kind of running along rafters and whatnot and coming to like a terminal block that then sends another wire up through to the second floor, and that wire comes up in one of the kids' rooms and it's kind of going along behind these shelves to this little terminal block. And there's a light here, and then out of that terminal block there's another one over here in this little loft area. I'm going to hit the switch there, so you know, if one of the kids wants to like read in this little loft area, then that works beautifully for that, and it doesn't have to have the light on the other side turned on in order for this one to work. So it's really just distributing DC electric through the house. So a lot of people don't like DC electric. They'll say that it's dangerous, and it can be if you don't know what you're doing, or if you overload your wires, or if you arc across your terminal block from positive to negative. If you create a short in the system, it can be dangerous. But what I like about this is that we can use it kind of as needed. We can add more if we really want to. As we're building the house, if we didn't really know what our final plan was going to be, if we knew that plans were going to have to change, we can go ahead and we can like do the insulation vapor barrier sheathing on the walls. We don't have to run wires anywhere because we know that we can add that later. As long as we kind of run the wires in places that are out of the way, people aren't going to be like tripping on them or whatever. So that's why we have them kind of going along like the floor joists beneath the second floor, things like that. There's lots of ways to keep wires out of the way. So I'm not too concerned about that. But it's nice in that it allows us to kind of get the house built. We know we're not going to be using that much electric, and what we do need, we can just run lights where we need them. We can have our little central power hub for the things that we need AC power for, because we really use very little. And being able to do the lights and fridge as DC really allows us to keep the inverter off so that we don't have that constant load on our batteries. But this is just our approach, and we kind of like it because it allows us to kind of take it or leave it. It allows us to kind of pay as we go, which is kind of how we've always done things. We've always kind of build as we can afford. That's kind of just the way we do things. We're very frugal people. But it also kind of reflects what we're trying to accomplish in living this way, and that is kind of simplifying, right? We're trying to have simpler lives where we're more focused on what's happening in the area around the house, what's happening with each other. Are we kind of really, you know, living in that kind of a way, or are we like constantly plugged in, which we're trying to not be constantly plugged in. Because a lot of people's approach is to think about all the stuff that you want to have in your house, right? And then let's design our power system so that it has enough power to supply all of our wants. Whereas our approach was to be like, let's start from scratch, think about what our needs are, and make sure we have enough power for our needs, and then a little bit extra if we want to, you know, like have internet. We have internet, and it's fine, and we use it when we need it, but it's not constantly on. It's on when we want to use it. We still like stream shows, we stream stuff on YouTube or whatever. It's not like we're living completely in the dark ages. It's just we have to use it intentionally. What's also really nice is that compared to those systems that people design to meet all of their wants, this is a system, and I think I talked about it in the other video. The whole thing is costing us maybe like $5,000 to have the whole power system done, right? And some people pay more than that in a single year for their power bill. And so to have that be like, bam, done, and that's going to last us for hopefully decades, right? Because our current system at our old house has been in use for pretty much a decade. And it's still going strong. Like, we don't really need to do anything with it. It's very similar. We've got DC lights, DC fridge, 4 6-volt batteries, and that's it. So what I really like is that, like I said, kind of pay as you go, expand as we need to, but instead of just like making it huge, keeping it small, adapting the way we do things. And sometimes if we really, really want to conserve power, we'll light a candle on a winter morning when it's still dark out. And we can do stuff by candlelight. You can get these really cool reflective candle holders with a mirror behind them so that you hang it on your wall, and that light that would normally be absorbed by your wall, well, that's actually getting reflected through the house now. They provide a surprising amount of light. Of course, if you're going to go that route, really using one of these DC light bars, kind of like what we've got going on here, sorry if that was too bright, but using one of those in the winter for a few hours in the morning, it really uses hardly any energy. Those things just sip power. It would be remiss of me to talk about the importance of having a DC fridge and planning your off-grid power consumption without mentioning the option of a propane fridge. A lot of people like propane fridges. I've used them before, and they can be great. It really depends on your situation. Like, if you live somewhere that there's a company that can deliver your propane, that you can get one of those big old tanks and get propane deliveries, and it's a good deal and everything, that's great. Not to say you can't do it with the little 5-gallon ones. It would just be lots of back and forth. But they can really be an important part of your power system, because fridges cycle on and off a lot, especially if they're in your house in a warm area. And so, for us, we like to keep our DC fridge out in a cool area. And you can also do the same thing with propane fridge. And you can also there's a little hack that a lot of people do, is if you have a shed or an outbuilding or out on a deck somewhere, have an old chest freezer that doesn't work anymore, and you can just keep stuff in there in the wintertime for extra storage, and it's going to be a freezer, basically. Unless it's a winter like this one, where it seems to be raining for a month on end, right in the middle of winter. It makes no sense. So yeah, as you're planning your power system, if you really want to get technical about it, you can add up all the appliances you plan to use on a daily basis, figure out their consumption, and then figure out how many amp hours you might need in your battery. Whereas amps times volts equals watts. Important calculation when you're trying to figure out how much power you can use. So if you want to go ahead and add up what you think the consumption of all of the stuff is that you want to use, that might give you an idea of the size of battery bank you need. And then once you figure out what size battery bank you need, you figure out how many solar panels you're going to need to fill that battery bank, figure out the size of inverter you need to draw AC power out of that battery bank if you're using AC powered appliances. And that's totally doable, and you can get assistance with that if you talk to people at a solar power place or an off-grid electronics kind of place. We've got one of those not too far from here. But you can do all that. We kind of did that back at the beginning, and the way we designed our new system is very, very based off of the old system, because it's been working so well for us. We know that, 4 golf cart batteries is enough for a small house for us. Our old house has 900 watts of solar. Our new one has 1,000 going into our main battery bank. So it's a little bit more. Our old inverter was 2,200 watts. Our new one is 2,500. So again, if we maybe need that extra little bit of oomph if we're like vacuuming or something or trying to turn on the wringer washer. But so we did all those calculations long ago, and we've kind of been refining our system as we go. But if you're starting from scratch, it might not be a bad idea to kind of like do all your calculations. But I do highly recommend DC or propane fridge, because AC fridges, they're usually kept in the house, in the kitchen, on all the time. Usually you have to have your inverter on all the time, and then you need a much bigger system. So I do highly recommend getting a non-AC kind of fridge. I do recommend DC lights, because those are the things that are going to save you the most power during this darkest time of year. And they are the things that kind of make it possible to do winters off of mostly solar in Alaska without having to run your generator all the time, or without having to have a massively expensive system. So I wanted to tack that on to the end of this video, just because I thought it was worth mentioning. I didn't want to like make the propane people feel left out. So that's all. Thanks.